Okay, cool. All right. So today we are happy to have Vaishnavi Kumar, who is a Boston-based designer and multidisciplinary artist with Bachelor of Science in Visual Communication from the University of Madras, India, and MFA in graphic design from Boston University. She has over 8 years of international experience. She works at the intersection of art direction, design, and strategy, spanning brand and print and digital communication, animation, UI, and art. She does it all. Vaish has worked with clients in finance, healthcare, higher education, engineering, nonprofits, and the performing arts. She's currently in-house at Loomis and Sayes and Company, a global investment firm. And then Vaish was born and raised in the Middle East and shaped by time in India and the US. Her nomadic background informs a layered, multidisciplinary studio practice rooted in storytelling. A self-taught papercut artist, she has exhibited in galleries across the US and Europe, with her work noted in Rolling Stone India. That's cool. She loves mentoring emerging artists and leads workshops and guest lectures at Suffolk and Boston University. So thanks, Vaish. Really glad you're
Thank
here.
you. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen
Perfect.
and tell me if you can see. Okay, it looks like you can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Just I'm on my work computer, so which is very finicky. Just fun fact, I have to work between Windows and Mac in one system. They've given me a MacBook, but they make me remote into a PC through the Mac, so it's very silly.
That's
But
crazy.
But anyway, thank you so much for having me. This is super exciting. Myself and our fellow members of Radius have heard a lot about your classes and the things that you're doing at Texas State. So it's really cool to meet you. And I'm excited to kind of chat after this and get to know more about your work. Um, while this is going to be a long deck, bear with me. There's a lot of images, so we will breeze through it. But if at any point you have any questions, anything you just want to chime in with, thoughts or anything, we can keep it very conversational. So, um, like Josh said, I'm a multidisciplinary designer and artist here based in Boston now. I've kind of just been all over the place. I was born and raised in Kuwait. I spent some time in the Gulf, moved to India for my undergrad, and came here for grad school. Since then, I've mostly been working in sort of corporate environments, working in-house, working for agencies, and also working freelance. While doing that, I kind of discovered over the past 8.5 years that there's also an audience for art in design in the more sort of like client commercial real world space, which has been really validating and fun to kind of like try to pepper that in. While it's not something that I have really like cracked the code to, it's something that I enjoy exploring and like trying to find ways to really blend in what I do as an artist with more commercial design projects, so to speak. So with that, we'll jump into our goal for this chat. So essentially, what we're going to do is take a closer look at unique ways of making and discover how we can layer that, intersect it, and recontextualize different mediums that we work with and narratives in our design practice. And today's medium in particular is papercut artwork, which is what I do. So have any of you done like paper cutting or know what it is or played around with an X-Acto blade or anything like that? Okay, so paper cutting is essentially the craft of using a knife or an X-Acto blade, which is what I use, to carve out patterns out of paper. And you can be intricate, you can be abstract, you can be free form, you can be like very sort of regimented and structured with it. But it's something that I discovered about a decade ago. I was on Instagram, I had just graduated. I was looking for like new ways of making art that would inspire me. And I stumbled upon this because a lot of artists were doing it at the time on my algorithm, at least. And it just really like captured my attention, mainly because it was one of these things that it related a lot to sort of architecture and lighting and stencils and this idea of like kind of reframing paper itself as a medium, and not just looking at it as a way of writing or reading from it, but to be able to use it as a tool or like something that can even be three-dimensional and you're challenging the tangibility of the material itself. Um, so this is something that really stood out to me. And so I started trying it with a box cutter and like the back of an old notebook that I didn't, because back then I didn't know what an X-Acto blade or a cutting mat was. And also because I didn't know where I could find that easily in India at the time. And I just found it really exciting. Like it felt almost like drawing in a way. And the way that I work with it is very freehand. I don't really draw a whole lot of guidelines before I jump into it. Um, if anything, I'll kind of draw the outer bounds of what I'm working within, but never the actual pattern. And this has kind of helped me challenge my own uh, fear of like making mistakes and learning to work with the material as I go and being more free form and less like I need to make sure that this is the perfect piece and more just seeing where it goes. So the way that I'm going to structure this is first I'll give you some cultural context of things that I grew up seeing that informs my principles in graphic design and in paper cut artwork, and then we'll go into how I kind of started the work that I've done, some like client examples as well, and we can open it up to chats after that. So this is just a little bit of culture context. Paper cutting has been an art all over the world. It is an ancient art form in many regions of the world. I believe the earliest known is from China, and all of and you know there's each style has their own cultural motifs, their own stories, different things that they're trying to tell, whether it's a means of decoration, whether it's a means of um, trying to send a message or just different ways that it's been used over time. But ultimately, it exists in the form of this stencil that's either backed by something or is kind of free form and hanging. My personal cultural influences are a lot uh, like are very rooted in architecture, to be honest. And so I was in India for a few years growing up, and I'm from the southern part of India. And generally in Indian culture and Indian architecture, there's so many different styles, so many different visuals that you see. But this one monument or landmark really caught my eye. It's the Mysore Palace. It's an ancient palace in the south of India. And I was really drawn to kind of like these patterns and these intricate details that you see on, you know, really like minute parts of these arches and the roofs, and just looking at how every single part of it is adorned essentially, and each thing can exist as its own art piece, but it's even more magnificent when you see it as a collection. This is some Mughal architecture. Really, the reason I included this is not just to show you the patterns and the nature-based forms that you see here, but also to look at the way that light interacts with it. A huge part of paper cutting to me is playing around with light and shadow. And sometimes, as we go, we'll talk about this more, but when you look at patterns that have been cut out, sometimes it's less about the pattern itself and more about what it's doing when it interacts with a different surface or a different material, and how that reframes the way that we consume the whole space itself. Um, these are some screenshots of Kuwait, where I grew up. One of my favorite malls called the Avenues. There wasn't really a lot to do growing up in Kuwait except go to the mall. But we had a lot of arabesque architecture. It's a really interesting intersection of Islamic art forms, sort of that like really beautiful symmetric geometric forms, with this like modern futuristic sort of approach to design as well. So you see a lot of paneling like this, a lot of roofs, a lot of like wall structures, just smaller ways of adorning a space that I was always really drawn to. And last but not least, my mom's saris. My mom has a huge sari collection. The saris are traditional garment worn by women. And it's really interesting to see how these exist and how they're made because a lot of them are embroidered upon, which this is embroidery. This pattern is block printed onto the fabric. In this instance, here the patterns itself are woven into the fabric as they're made. So just again this idea of beautiful geometric symmetric forms and how they change the texture, they change the way that we look at colors and how light interacts with these really beautiful materials that form what a sari is. Um, so how I started and who inspires me, like I said, I found this on Instagram, and um, Rebecca Lechtler was one of the first artists I found. Really fun, random, weird fact. She is a Boston-based artist too, and recently I discovered that you had Pam last week, right? For your So she ended up being Pam's student a few years after I knew of her. So it was this really interesting, like full circle moment. But I've always been really inspired by her work. And again, like just seeing how like the light is falling and creating these patterns. And there's something beautiful about the transience of that too, right? Mia Perlman is another artist. She does a lot of when you look at each piece of paper, it's more abstract and sort of bigger, but when it's all coming together, it creates this very intricate, immersive effect that kind of draws you in. Um, and it's almost overwhelming, but I really love the use of like minimal color that she does. Um, Another artist is Donna Ruff. This one was particularly interesting, where she cut out patterns that also are kind of directly tied to the content on the paper itself. Again, using paper cutting as a way to enhance or add another layer to the story being told. Shiloh Shiv Suleiman is an Indian artist. She has gathered a global audience. She does a lot of installations that engage communities. There's actually a mural that she's done which is in Cambridge, I believe, near Kendall, if I'm not wrong. But a lot of her work is nature. It uses a lot of forms in nature. She works a lot with paper, with canvas, with interactive multimedia installations, but she also does these woodcut forms. And again, it's like using these really minimal marks to add more depth, add more layer, change the way that we're looking at this entire piece itself. Last but not least, this might be a familiar image. This is Anila Aga. She does a lot of light-based sculptures, and essentially the idea is having these really intricate metal cut pieces that form a light, but it's always in like a massive room. And the second you enter the room, you're enveloped by the shadows that it's casting, and you kind of become a part of the art piece. Um, the reason I showed you all this is to kind of just, as I show you my work, there are a lot of principles that I value in the artists that I see. And we can talk more about that if anyone has any questions. So diving into my work, this was the first paper cut I did. Again, this was with the box cutter back then. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like, you know what, let's see how it goes. I wanted to make something sculptural, and it was a really fun exercise in seeing how sort of vulnerable paper is as a medium. It's so, and this was like just basic cardstock, but really seeing like how you can take away from it, but you can still engineer it to be a structure that can stand on its own. Um, and when I did this, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I can't really use an eraser. I can't undo anything. I'm gonna screw up and we'll just figure it out as it goes. And, if I make mistakes, I'll cut over it or edit it, or maybe I'll come to accept that that's fine. Like, it's gonna look messy. This is one right over there. Moving forward, this was the next piece that I did. Again, excuse me. I was really drawn to the idea of lighting. My dad, when I was growing up, would create a lot of lamps at home, just like table lamps and things with random stuff that we had around the house, a lot of like wooden brackets, just finding lampshades or creating his own lampshades. And I we had this IKEA lamp, and this happened to serendipitously kind of just fit over that, and it just became one of the items in our home. And then I started to think more about what I could do with the paper cuts itself, and like how can that be pushed further? Is there can I use it as a stencil? Does that add more layer, more meaning? And so this was a very sort of like elementary experiment. I was really obsessed with a show called Whale Wars back in the day, and it was about this nonprofit that goes out into the Southern Ocean and like fights illegal whaling companies and corporations. And so I had this like idea that I wanted to create something that I could use as patterning or imagery that could be used in communications or like campaign stuff if they ever did something like that. And so I started creating these little stencils and like just sponging paint through it. And it was a fun experiment. And then when I started like documenting it, I realized that there's another layer to the this art itself, or just kind of what I value, which is the way that you document the work that you create can really change the way you're looking at it. You can repurpose it. The images you end up with could be repurposed in a completely different context, and you the just having that openness is a good thing. And so when you look at this image on the left, it is what it is. It kind of looks a little ugly. It's like messy. Um, but then when you crop this, there's a lot of like interesting emphasis on the shadow and the depth, and the linoleum under the floor is like creating slightly different effect. The tonality is completely different, even though I never changed the like color corrected the image between the two. But it just shifts the way you're looking at it. Fast forward when I came to BU for my master's, I was really like encouraged to explore this as a part of design. I didn't really think it could be at the time, but I'm very grateful that it was kind of pushed onto me. So one of the first things I did was create this book cover. Um, and while there's no information about it on the cover, it doesn't really tell you what this is about. It kind of still creates enough visual interest that you want to pick it up and kind of interact with it, especially when it looks like a delicate piece. And there's a book is meant to be interacted with, so kind of like just challenging that notion was interesting to me. um, as we progressed in the program, I started playing a lot with imagery that I had, like photos that I'd taken on my phone, like gift wrapping, type, just things that I had around that I could, again, recontextualize, repurpose, reframe. So these were some experiments. Here I have some handwritten type. Here I just printed a bunch of words that um, I like associated with what I was doing, and then use like a headlamp to cast that shadow. And then this itself like becomes an interesting image. So I just wanted to continue playing with that. Um, in my work, I've always been really drawn to nature-based forms. I don't know why, to be honest. Like, I don't have a very solid why, but the one thing I do know is it comes very naturally to me. There's something about like the free-flowing softness of nature-based forms and motifs that are really exciting to work with, especially if I'm working within certain parameters. And so I started a series that really kind of pushed my paper cutting to a new level, which was creating these anatomical drawings of organs using other like forms of life to kind of recreate that image. So this is a heart, this is a brain, and I had one more, but I think that's the thing. But these two I was really excited about, proud of, and started seeing what I could do where I can create like recognizable imagery, but still keep it vague enough and true to my experimentation. Um, my all of this was a part of like discovering what my thesis was going to be, and I realized that I wanted to make paper cut art a more scalable form, and I really wanted to figure out how I could do that. So that's why I started playing with lighting, especially like how does paper cut art fit within the grand scheme of graphic design, right? Or communication design. It needs to be easy to replicate. It needs to be easy um, to kind of share and like create an effect that you want someone to have when they're not interacting with the piece in person, physically. Um, so I was just asking all of these questions, and this was a really beautiful collection of paper cuttings that I inherited. Um, my grandma passed away in 2017, and I found out that one of her closest family friends was a paper cutting artist, and it was a really weird serendipitous thing. But he was, I believe, partially blind, and he would cut patterns with surgical scissors using whatever papers he could find anywhere. A lot of it was newspapers or like paper that was placed in between sheets of fabric to keep them crisp. And so I got this really beautiful collection. And then I was really interested in certain moments where um, this is like an X-ray of my mom from when she was 9 years old or 8 years old. They just had it. And this is also the very like Indian slash South Asian way of being where you don't throw anything away. Everything sort of still lives in your home. Nothing is trash until it is truly trash. And so, like this old X-ray was being used as a way to keep these paper cuts, crisp and still like delicate. And I found it really interesting because they were pasted like this, but when you flip it, it almost looks like organs on the other side. And so again, it ties in with this idea of how do you document what you're making and like how can you uh, add another layer of narrative. I then started scanning his paper cuts in and printing them at like a larger like A1 scale and then cutting out patterns out of that to kind of add my spin to his work. Um, Eventually, all of this ended up in my thesis, and my thesis was called Layered Narratives and the Handcrafted Experience. A lot of the work that I do is drawn to preserving family histories, reflecting on pivotal personal stories, stories in my family, and just really trying to celebrate that. And so for my thesis, I created this immersive room that had a lot of different pieces that I had worked on. So you can see the anatomy ones on the left. Then I was repurposing some of these patterns, digitizing them and creating these little votives out of acrylic, these floor lamps out of wood, and then some more acrylic lamps that were like uplighting the wall. Um, the pieces that were cut out of acrylic, I had in a little tray here with candles. And then I had two videos projected that also tied in with my paper cut work. I can share a link to that later, but um, essentially it was just this like overwhelming room of what are all of the things that you can do with the principles of paper cutting. I also had a journal called Conversations with No One that kind of tied all these pieces together. And if you read it, you would know what this was about. Otherwise, it was just a random room of a lot of different effects. Um, And then again, when I was documenting it, I was really drawn to just like these images, like really zooming in on the textures, the sort of lack of context, but still the fact that this is interesting enough to look at. Um, and when I started looking for jobs, I went to one of the job that I ended up getting right after graduating was with this design agency called Core Group. And all of their clients were extremely corporate. They were working with higher ed, they were working in finance, they were working with healthcare. Those were the three main pillars. Um, and when I showed this, I was honestly terrified. I was like, does any of this have a home? Do they care? What are they going to say? Like, but it was in the interview when we started having conversations about my thesis that they particularly picked on images like this. And they're like, oh, yeah, I could see this as a double spread in a catalog or a view book that we do for this university. It ties in with their colors or it ties in with their texture. And I was like, this is interesting. There's something here that I need to keep pushing. And this isn't useless or it isn't like inaccessible. Um, My first big project came in the form of album artwork. I created six pieces for an EP by Nush Lewis. She's a childhood friend from Kuwait. She's a harpist and singer-songwriter in India, and she's doing a lot sort of in the music and independent music space there. But she released an EP, and this was the cover that I created. This is a spin of her own logo. But I wanted to use these, again, nature-based forms to tell the story of what each song was. There were five songs on the EP. Each of these was produced freehand. The concepts were agreed upon early on, but I produced this freehand on like A1 sheets of paper. Um, the real challenge was transporting this to India somehow, but we made it happen. Um, all of these pieces were framed and then they were sold at the launch. Um, she had a launch event, and that's when I was like, okay, wait, I can actually do this, and people give a shit about it, and there's a home for it. Um, and then again, this was another interesting moment. She wanted to scan all of these, and she was like, hey, what if we add color to them? Because I need this to be on like Spotify, or I need this to be in my digital communications. What are we going to do? I was like, oh shit, that's right. Let's do that. So digitized all of it, added color. We played a lot with that. And then we printed those onto acrylic panels that were then suspended on stage, and then light was projected through it. So that was something that she collaborated with like the local venue organizers with. And it was just really exciting and interesting to see this living in a completely different way. It's almost like the negative to positive shift of the art itself. Um, that's a photo from the event. And then I believe the next few pieces I'm going to show you is from work I've done for Radius. And we've had some really fantastic opportunities. I credit Josh for that, like just putting this collective together. It's given us so many unique ways to explore the things that we are interested in. We all have our own sort of like passions and questions and things that we're exploring. And it's been a really great way to kind of have a safe space to explore that and just do different things and continue to push our craft. So, Tapestry of a Third Culture Kid was a piece that I did for our very first show. Lines Divide, this was in East Boston. And this was a piece that I used as a way to kind of reflect what home is to me. I grew up primarily in Kuwait, but I moved around the Middle East a lot as a kid. And so I had these vivid memories growing up that I wanted to kind of capture, bring in like the idea of different scripts that I grew up around, Indian scripts, Arabic, learning how to read and write Arabic, but not learning how to speak it, um, maps of the different countries I lived in. And then also the influences of like of Islamic patterns and Indian patterns and landscape and all of that. So this was a tapestry that kind of spoke to all of that. Um, and it was just a really enjoyable process. I've discovered that I always tend to work with white paper. I think it's I'm trying to challenge that honestly. But I really enjoy working with white because there's a lot of illusion and layering that you can play around with. Um, and there's a fun challenge of having white on white surfaces, usually in every gallery that we go to. Um, and then going back to the job that I was talking about earlier, I had an opportunity to use like the paper cut concepts. We pitched it to the client we were working with called Pine Street Inn, which is a nonprofit here in Massachusetts that tackles homelessness. And they've done a lot in the state. They have a lot of different properties where they help unhoused folk move in, kind of help them rebuild their lives and move back into society, so to speak. And so they wanted illustrations of all of their different properties. So I created paper cuts of them, and then realized I didn't really need to create the actual paper cuts. I could just use those principles and digitize them, and still have these that sort of effect. So this is some work that I did. This is a really terrible picture, but the illustrations and the paper cuts that I did were printed onto these screens, and then they were lit with the colors of that brand. So when it was actually lit, it looked better. It doesn't look that good here. Um, but this was for their 50th anniversary gala. And then moving into my studio practice, over the pandemic, I started I kind of lost a little bit of inspiration, and like creative spark, and I wanted to get it back. And I had a rule for myself. I was going to do some kind of animation tutorial. So either like 5 minutes of something or a 10-minute tutorial and follow that every day. And I would also cut something every day. I just had to kind of push myself to do that. So I started doing things that were more three-dimensional. This in particular was kind of a breakthrough for me because I kept creating these like I call them marigolds. I'm very inspired by marigolds in South Indian culture, especially. But I created it from a single sheet of paper. And you can see that here it's solid and all the petals are ever so slightly not cut at the very base. I just wanted to engineer it and kind of see how I could create a more sculptural piece. So this is a small one that I did, and it's in like a black glitter cardstock. And I used the same cardstock as a backdrop, and used my little IKEA lamp to photograph it with my phone. And then I started really having fun with the documentation of it. Like, this is more interesting to me than the actual paper cut itself. I still have the piece. I, I should have pulled it. Okay, I don't have that close to me right now, but um, I started taking photos on my phone, and what I kept doing was like turning the phone upside down. And this is something you can do too. I believe I learned this on TikTok, but turning it upside down, keeping it close to the surface, and just like playing around with different angles and just being really experimental and weird with it. Um, I just ended up having a lot of like fun serendipitous moments with that, and started capturing these really abstract, like moody, ethereal looking photos that I really enjoyed. And the way that I still haven't done anything with these, but my goal is to kind of have larger prints um, on different surfaces, and just play around with scale more. For context, this flower is probably like 2 inches wide. I continued that. I created this little like leaf cutout. I started bending the paper, again, photographing it differently. Here it almost looks like graphite. It doesn't really look like paper so much. Um, but again, playing with that, playing with the light and shadow interactions. The actual paper cut is only this top half, but then when you place it and you capture the shadow, it looks like a complete leaf from a different plant. Um, some more images that I played with. I'm really drawn to like contrasts of the sharp and soft like shadows and like forms, and really just kind of challenging the way that we look at those, and also like adding color through light itself. This is another paper cut that I did, which is a bunch of roses. Again, I was bending it, playing with it, and just taking some photos. Here you can't even tell what it actually is, but this could still, be used in a piece where I need to put some text on it, or it could be used on a postcard, or it could be just so many different, or it could even be on like a website if you need sort of a background image for something, or you want to anchor another image that is like the main image that you want to look at. Just different ways of using what we already have. Um, Continuing to push that, here's another piece. I just cut this like little ribbon piece and just twisted it, I was playing with it. This is really interesting to me personally because this is just white paper and the background is the same white paper. And it's the exact same thing on the left. It's just how I moved the lamp to create that image. And again, everything is just on the iPhone. I'm a huge advocate for using what we have. Initially, I got really caught up with, I need this tool and I need that ring light and I need this and like it needs to be perfect and Instagrammy, and it really doesn't. You can use what you have, and reuse what you've created. Challenging myself to play more with color, I was like, okay, I'm gonna use all yellow paper this time. So cut out these marigolds, started like crushing them, playing with them, and creating these really fun abstract textures. And then this is a piece that I worked on in the pandemic, obviously. I was just really drawn to the idea, and I still am drawn to the idea of papercut as a wearable form. Um, I'm working on a couple of pieces right now, but this is the first one that I did, which is uh, obviously just a mask. It is not functional. It took me about 8 to 9 hours to cut this, but it was a really fun challenge to work with the same black glitter paper that I showed you earlier and then find a way to kind of fasten it. So I used red ribbon on the sides and just glued it on so I could wear it. Um, I don't know. You might be aware of this, but Stefan Sagmeister has an Instagram where he posts submissions from different designers all over the world. And this is one that I submitted, and it ended up on his page. And it was really interesting to see the way that people responded to it. Like there were a lot of comments that were like, "Oh, this is really cool and it's interesting," and then a lot of them being like, "This is the most irresponsible, stupid thing I've seen." Like you're basically telling people not to wear masks. Like, how dare? It was so ridiculous, but it was just funny because I was like, I didn't think this could be that controversial. Um, but this was again a challenge, and I had more of a hard time photographing it than I did like making it, to be honest, because I just couldn't tell what I wanted to do with the photo when I posted. I had a lot of like wider, like full shots of my face. And then one of the other members of Radius, Kristen Malia, kind of workshopped it with me. And she said, I think there's something interesting about how tightly these are framed. And it kind of confronts you, which it does. I feel like it's like almost uncomfortable to look at this scale. One of the other pieces that I did down the years with 3Ds Collective is called Records. This is again a tapestry. I'm just really interested in more sculptural pieces. Um, and this is a reflection of different emotions I went through over a period of 2 years. I was dealing with different like issues of like being in the US and navigating just the system. And I wanted to reflect on the emotional experience of that. So like the joys of it, the frustrations of it, the sadness of it, and it came together as this abstract piece. So each pattern is associated with an emotion. I've always found this like sort of fiery pattern. I've done it a lot in my work before, but I've always found it kind of aggressive. And I don't know if others feel differently about it, but I always associate that with like frustration or anger, or just something more like that. So this is that. These droopy shapes are associated with anxiety. Um, this is I always use marigolds as a motif that recurs in all of my pieces. I associate it with celebration, with joy, especially because marigold flowers are used a lot in South India for celebration. And then this piece was just a fun add-on to make it feel more full as a tapestry, and it's done with tracing paper. And then these are some detailed shots of the pieces. Like I was saying, it's all about documentation for me, and also just like the fact that these sheets are really thin, but then when you photograph it at this scale, it looks a lot thicker and more rigid. I find that interesting. This is the most recent piece that I did for our recent show. What was this early last year, Josh? It's been time is like a blur to me. This was the
Yeah. I guess that would
festival.
have been maybe February,
Yeah,
just about this time last year, yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's crazy. Um, I wanted to move into the sculptural aspect more, start playing more with light. And this is a piece that it's called Hi, I Am, and it's a reflection of the my now blended family that I'm in. My husband is American, and I wanted to use the names in my family and the names in his family and really like go into the meanings of them and represent that as a lamp. And so all of these motifs are they're correlated, but they each one is informed by sort of the root of the names in our family. Um, and the reason that I made it a lamp is because I wanted it to reflect sort of the emotion that I've always associated with lamps. Again, like I said, my dad used to build them all the time. Warm lighting, like these accent pieces have always been sort of a symbol of home for me. It just makes me feel like comforted. It makes me feel like this is a familiar space. I can be myself here. And I wanted to evoke that. So I created a lamp and it was a really fun challenge. Um, there's some more detailed shots. We're almost at the end. So this is a piece that I did for the BU alumni exhibition last fall. Um, the theme of this was information overload, and we could interpret that however we wanted to. I decided to document like 30 minutes of doom scrolling. I doom scroll a lot on Instagram mainly, and I really wanted to kind of curb that for myself. But I also was thinking about the fact that I'm generally an anxious person, but I always get like really anxious after scrolling, but I can also just not stop. And so when I documented these 30 minutes, and I did it over a few periods of time to see if it was consistent information, um, I started to like categorize the kind of posts I was seeing. So made a list of all the different posts I saw, um, categorized them, and then associated like different patterns for each category. Um, And so there's news, there's personal, there's cute animals, there's politics, there is art, there's music, like all of these different things. Um, and it ended up being really shocking because 30 minutes of scrolling is 60 posts on average, um, and 16 feet of paper when I cut it. So this, and each panel is proportionate to actually the size of the posts on my phone. So I like kind of measured it out on my screen and put that so it's to scale, uh, if I can say that. And then I installed this like this. And the idea for sort of this like tapering actually came from my husband. Because we were talking a lot about like the ups and downs of scrolling. You kind of want to hop off and then you suddenly get like the adrenaline rush or sorry, like the dopamine, and then you like get back into it again, and then again it's like a slow crash. So this reflects that. More recently, the work that I've been doing has shifted a little bit away from paper cutting, but still using those principles. So I still use sort of that like freehand, wavy, intricate pattern style, and I've been using that more in lino cut. I'm teaching myself how to do it. It's been a really fun experiment, and I have like sold these prints at just the one fair that I've done once a year. Josh and I were at it last year. It's called Multiple Formats and it's at Boston University. It's actually a really fantastic opportunity to just share your work with people. Applications are open to designers and artists of all kinds, and you can apply to showcase your work. So these are just some prints that I've done. I was also selling some paper cuts over there. And that's it. Just kind of going back over what we talked about. I think the biggest takeaway for me, and I hope it is for you, is to just try things and be experimental and not like think too much about whether something is relevant, or whether something is useful or whether something is traditional design. There's always a home for what you're interested in. And image making is a lot more than just the digital tools that we use. Um, embrace your mistakes. Imperfection might just be what you need. You are gonna stumble. You're gonna, if you end up doing paper cutting, which I hope you try, it's really fun and relaxing. But if whatever you end up making, like you will make mistakes along the way, but there's a way that you can always turn that around. Um, You can blend digital and analog methods in unique ways, and there are people out there that value that, and especially in spaces that you wouldn't expect it. Repurpose and recontextualize what you have. The work that you're creating, what you may think is a final piece may not be a final piece necessarily. You can revisit it, 6 months, 8 months, a year down the line, and see how you can reuse it. Um, Document everything, like random photos you're taking, random videos you're taking, all of that can function as some basis for an art or design piece. Um, and more than anything, just like prioritize the process and fear the outcome less. The more you're kind of free form with what you want to explore, the more you're going to learn along the way and just have fun with it. Yeah. And we can open, I hope we're, oh shoot, did I go over time?
No,
You're
no,
good?
you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we can open it up to questions or talk about things that you're exploring.
Thanks, Vaish. Really appreciate it.
Um,
Uh,
I have a like interesting question. More into like paper cuts and basically I use follow YouTube tutorials like folding papers and then like cut in certain shapes and they when I open up something like that. So
Awesome.
it's interesting like how you describe that your traditional things and combine them into paper cuts and different projects. Um, how do you think of doing a project like you're doing a certain project? Do you think of that initially that I'm making it something like that, or it just happens like you make it and then give it a name of something like that? Uh,
That's a really good question. I think it depends on the context. So when I showed you like the studio work that was all the weird, like dark, moody photos,
yeah,
I had no idea what I was doing when I started. I was like, oh, I just want to make something. I'll just cut, I'll see what, and I usually end up making flowers or leaves or something like that. But I keep that free, oh my God, free form. When it comes to the more structured sort of like gallery prompts or like prompts from Radius Collective that we all come up with, that I have to have a little bit more of a structure. So I kind of have a plan. I'll sketch out what my goal is. So I'll say, okay, I want this to be a tapestry. I don't know how, but I want it to be a tapestry. What's the story I'm telling? So I'll write down a lot of keywords, and then based on those keywords, I'll kind of brainstorm, either sketch like very loose drawings of what I'm going to create, or just set like dimensions. So like choose the paper, set the dimension for myself, and then say, okay, this is going to maybe be a wavy pattern. Start cutting the wavy pattern, and then see where it goes with that. So it's kind of a mix of being planned, but also not too much.
no, got it.
Yeah.
what else, guys?
Actually, I have a question. What kind of cuttings have you tried? I know you said you've like folded it and cut out patterns and then.
Oh, basically I use like for example, basically for our projects for mail art, it's kind of, I don't know, it's bloods
Oh,
and something like that. So it's part of a like color theme. My
oh,
topic
that's
is on
awesome.
roads. So these are like structural shapes, just
Yeah.
print it and then cut it and then just step it and make it like 3D version of it. And then other like I do a lot of origami and stuff. So and
Oh, beautiful.
origami things and they have to like cut it for making a spider, like a whole spider and stuff. So there was like YouTube tutorials on that, and I was just uh, followed it and something like that. It was interesting, and I can
Yeah.
somewhat coming from Asia and as you like as an Islam, as an I am an Muslim, and those
Yeah.
Islamic tradition and those drawings of like Mughals empires and those I can really relate. In the mosque, I can see that. Yeah, that was interesting.
That's really interesting. When you said origami, I remember seeing this. I think it's called kirigami. You might know it. It's basically mixing paper cutting with origami. So you
Oh,
cut the patterns and then you origami, like you create origami creations
got it.
with it. I think you might have some fun with that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Vaish, I mean, I really enjoy or it was really nice to see how this paper cutting found its way into like the client project. Because I wonder, or maybe I mean you kind of talk about this, but it perhaps seems that like the gap between the craft and like working for a financial institution or whatever might seem very, very vast.
Yeah.
But I think like thinking about that campaign or like the pieces in the room, like that's quite unique. And I wonder, right, like someone with a more kind of graphic focused branding background's not going to be able to maybe make something that interesting. It kind of reminded me of things you might see also in like movie title
Hmm.
sequences or something where like they're going for kind of a really unique graphic sense. I was curious if you've dabbled with like creating digital versions of these somehow, or I don't know, like I don't want to say the word AI, but um, you've got such a like strong visual language. Are there ways to like take advantage of the digital world to kind of help them grow or, just try something new?
I mean, that's a fantastic question. Honestly, like it's one of those things that I have to like challenge myself with because it's the way that I feel about working with color. It like scares me almost. But I know that that's why I need to try it. I've always been really interested. Every time I log into Facebook, actually, every single day when I open Facebook, the stories at the top, the first one is always prompted by Meta AI that shows one of my paper cuts in a different like effect every single day.
Interesting.
It's so strange, and I don't know why, but I'm like, there's something here that's making me think of like, what would this look like as if I had cropped like a very just like a scanned in a paper cut, cropped a section of it, and like created something that I can use as like a projection in a space or like create branding elements with that. It's the thought has crossed my mind. I haven't really dabbled in it yet. Um, but what I will say to that is the gap, going back to like what you said about the gap, right? Like between this and like working in a financial institution. I think there are ways, and I'm still trying to find it. There are ways to use the skills that you're bringing and like create elements that you can scan and then digitize and like present as sort of branding elements or campaign imagery or things like that when you're pitching your work within your team, if that makes sense. I've like kind of done that this year. The company that I work for is they just turned 100 years old, and there's a lot of like events being planned for the year. And a lot of that involves like environmental signage or, event graphics and things like that. And I've started to pitch little paper cut informed things. So I have my little X-Acto blade and mat at work, and I've been cutting patterns and then showing it to my boss and being like, "Hey, what do you think if we like scan this in and colored it and used it for XYZ?" Um, so I think there's room there. I just need to figure that out.
Yeah, I think especially like patterning,
Yeah.
you can create. I feel like that's sometimes hard, honestly, digitally to make kind of those structures. So, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
it's an interesting thought, I think. Also because not everyone is like into very intricate patterns, right? Like a lot of times you want something that's more graphic, that's more minimal. Um, so it's interesting to think of that like challenge with the digital application of it.
What else, y'all?
Yeah, you talk a lot kind of about like embracing your mistakes and kind of like and learning how to create more freely. How was that process of you like kind of accepting that? And also like what's some advice? Because I feel like me personally, I'm a perfectionist and it's kind of hard for me to be like, this is a mistake. I gotta learn from it without like trying to go and fix it.
That's a great question. Before I jump in, do you like, is there a particular style that you struggle with or way of making, or is it just like across the board, whether it's digital or analog?
Across the board, like not even design wise either, just everything. Like if I made a mistake, how do I how do I fix this kind of thing?
Yeah. Um, it is hard. Like it's taken a while to come around to it and to start talking about it as a way of like, oh hey, this is like this isn't the worst thing that I accidentally cut the wrong shape or the paper snapped or tore or whatever. It takes time, but I think it also the fact that like paper cutting is kind of an unforgiving way of working. Like you're working with a blade and I kind of do the extreme sport version where I don't draw things in pencil before. And um I've found I used to try and do that. I used to try and like draw the patterns before and I would cut over it. Um but when I was doing that, I was finding myself getting way more frustrated with the fact that I wasn't cutting perfectly over the lines that I had drawn. And so the idea of being more freehand with it felt liberating. Because then I haven't set myself up for like a perfect circle that I have to cut or a perfect leaf shape or whatever. Like I'm kind of just being like, okay, I'm trying this. If it works, it works. If not, I'll I'll cut around it, I'll figure it out. And it comes with practice, to be really honest. Like the fact that this doesn't have an undo button makes me it forces me not to be a perfectionist. Um, I would say something that like is a good way to challenge that for yourself is if you make a mistake, like say you're creating something digitally. Say you make a mistake, you didn't like place a shape or a form or a letter exactly where it was supposed to be in your composition. Fight the urge to redo it immediately and like let it kind of just sit there. Um, and create a duplicate of what you're doing. So you still have that in the background, and then you can work on a separate iteration where you are perfecting what you think you made a mistake with. And then you can compare the two and see if like, hey, was that actually that terrible? Or like, did it really make a difference to, fuss over that so much? Or could I have continued with it? I think that's like one way to do it. I've done that in paper cutting sometimes where I'll cut something and I'm like, oh my God, I hate this. Like this is I'm like so annoyed. But I'm also too scared to like trash it and like jump into a brand new thing. Um, and then I find that, oh, actually it wasn't that bad. Like no one else can tell it was a mistake other than myself. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think that that's very interesting to like just kind of fight the urge, just kind of push it down for a side and like
Yeah.
maybe like you probably forget that you even did that.
Yeah, yeah, you do forget. And then over time, like you look back at the piece you created and you'll be like, oh, hey, this is actually, I'm proud of this. And
Yeah.
then you find more humor in it. Like the lightness comes over time, looking back on what you think you screwed up with. But yeah, I would just give it time and fight it.
I had a question. So, the work where you layered the skeleton of your mom. So,
Yes.
yeah. So, like, why did you choose your mom?
So that wasn't um I never layered that. I found it like that in the collection. So whoever had collected all of these paper cuts from the family friend had pasted some of those paper cuts on this old X-ray of my mom.
Okay.
And when I scanned it, I didn't realize it was an X-ray because when I looked at it just like in my hands, it just looked like a solid piece of like black paper.
Uh,
I could tell it was an old X-ray, but I couldn't see the image. But when I scanned it is when it like lit up. So looking at the image then, I found it really interesting. I was like, oh wait, this is crazy. This is an X-ray. I should flip it and scan that part too. And when I flipped it is when I saw like this is a serendipitous moment of this itself is like an art piece almost. It feels intentional with the way it's been placed.
Yeah, because the artwork incorporated is later, or like you incorporated it like while you were scanning it through.
No, it was on there. Like when so this all of these paper cuts are what that family friend created. And so when my uncle gave me this collection, they had like saved some of these paper cuts like that. So it's like glued onto the X-ray. So
Oh,
I can't even remove it. It's essentially what they created. And I received it and I scanned it and I was like, oh my God, this is so
okay.
strange and unique. Yeah. And I wish I knew why they did that too. I think they were just using what they had. Like they just needed something to hold these. Because this is also the paper that they put, when you put like sheets of paper between saris in the shop or like between sheets or something like it's that kind of paper. So it's
Yeah,
really thin.
yeah, like in saris they have so those kind of prints, like Indian saris, the
Exactly.
motif they use. Yeah,
Yeah. Especially like to keep like cotton stiff or that sort of just that fabric. It's almost like tracing paper almost.
yeah. From when did you start like exploring into paper cuts as your method of what do you call it? Practicum or like something like that?
I very seriously started like incorporating it into design in grad school. So in 2016, that's when I started because I was doing it on the side as like, oh, this is a fun thing I do and I post to Instagram, but like uh not until someone pushed me into doing it. Like when I created that book cover, that's when I started seeing that this is a way of like adding meaning to the patterns that I'm creating.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So to be able to like, how can all of these different patterns that I like to cut, how can I use um, a prompt or like use that to tell a story in a way, and also just make it a part of like design layouts and add text and things like that. So it really between 2016 and 2018 was the big push for me.
Yeah, it has a very ambiguous, you can say, like, this piece is pretty much like it's a torso of a female,
Yeah,
and also, like the motifs are floral, so it really gives me the feminine, like the part of, like the body of a female
yeah,
and the motifs. So it kind of correlates together and brings out the emotion together. So this
yeah,
piece is very, very like, I like this piece.
yeah. I agree with you. I think there's something interesting too with like when he cut these, he's cut a peacock shape over here, and then the rest of it is these symmetric floral patterns. And the idea of using like that is associated with life, right? Like it's a life form, and then pasted over a different life form, and the curves and all of that. I agree with what you're saying. Like it is really interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vaish. Yeah, I don't want to keep you any longer tonight.
For you guys.
I know you're already 1 hour ahead of us. Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. Yeah, hope you have a good weekend.
Yeah, thank you so much. You too. And if anyone wants to reach out to me at any point to just chat about portfolio stuff or career stuff, I'm open. You can reach out to me anytime.
Cool. I'll share your LinkedIn at the very least.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care. Good to see you.
You too. All right.